Today's video is brought to you by The Lord of the Rings: Fate of the Fellowship, the newly announced cooperative Middle-earth board game. Each playthrough is a new experience as you chart your own course in an effort to destroy the ring and bring down Sauron. It's one of the greatest moments of divine intervention in all Middle-earth, when Eru himself sends back Gandalf after his death after fighting the Balrog. With his upgraded power, Gandalf the White would play a pivotal role in the outcome of the War of the Ring. But what if Gandalf was never sent back? What if his death was final, and Middle-earth was left to fend off the dark forces of the world without its greatest ally? Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover What If Gandalf Remained Dead? As always for our theory videos, we start off by finding a point of deviation from the canon story. In this case, that's quite easy. Gandalf and the Balrog known as Durin's Bane take their battle to the peak of Celebdil. There they fight this epic clash of powerful beings barely fathomable to mortals. Finally, as Gandalf would later relay in the canon tale, "Great smoke rose about us. Vapor and steam. Ice fell like rain. I threw down my enemy, and he fell from the high place, and broke the mountainside where he smote it in his ruin." Then darkness takes the wizard, straying out of thought and time, until in the canon story, he is returned, upgraded as Gandalf the White to finish his task. But in this theory, Eru does not intervene, and Gandalf is not sent back. This will have ramifications that drastically affect characters and events, and will alter the history of Middle-earth on a grand scale. But first, we should answer the question, what would happen to Gandalf in this case? Fortunately, we have a couple of examples that show us what happens when one of the Maiar dies. When Sauron is ultimately defeated, his spirit is seen as a great black cloud, stretching his arm out before a great wind blows it away. Sauron is then left to become a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows. But perhaps the most applicable one is the demise of another wizard, when Saruman is killed by Grima Wormtongue on the very doorstep of Bag End. To the dismay of those that stood by, about the body of Saruman a great mist gathered, and rising slowly to a great height, like smoke from a fire, as a pale shrouded figure it loomed over the hill. For a moment it wavered, looking to the west, but out of the west came a cold wind, and it bent away, and with a sigh dissolved into nothing. Unlike Saruman, Gandalf the Grey had remained true to his mission. Therefore, in the event of his death, his spirit would depart his body and be accepted by the West, floating on the wind, a weakened soul in search of its true home in the uttermost West. Without the White Wizard to guide them, the first people affected are the three hunters. As they wander the forests of Fangorn, they would have no reunion with their departed friend. Instead, they would search the woods for Merry and Pippin beyond that original date of March 1st, 3019. And without Gandalf to later heal him, Theoden remains under the influence of Grima Wormtongue's influence and his poison. While in the canon story, a healed Theoden would set out to make war on Isengard on March 2nd, our still ailing king would still be in the Golden Hall, and Éomer in his prison cell. When word comes to Edoras on March 3rd from Caorl, there has been a second battle at the Fords of Isen, and an army of 10,000 orcs and Dunlendings is making its way through Rohan. While Grima's influence over Theoden is great, it is not so great as to make him entirely without reason. By this point, the garrison at Helm's Deep is under siege by the vastly superior force of Isengard, for there is no 3,000 strong Rohirrim force bolstering its ranks. Theoden and his people instead flee to the closest and most defensible location available to them, Dunharrow. Meanwhile, just as in the canon tale, Isengard is under attack. With his army off to war, Saruman's fortress is easily taken over by the Ents, with Merry and Pippin in tow. Now, a quick note here for those concerned about Gandalf's role in Treebeard accepting the hobbits as such. This is actually invented for the films. In the books, Gandalf implies to the three hunters that he only saw Treebeard from a distance a few days before, and it would seem his arrival at a sacked Isengard is the first time Merry and Pippin have seen him since his resurrection. But back to our theory, the net result for Saruman is, for now, the same. His domain is now under the control of Treebeard and the Ents. We are told that Saruman's losses in the canon story are complete. The force of perhaps 1,000 to 2,000 orcs and men defending his fortress are destroyed. Therefore, there is no one to bring word to Saruman's army, which is quickly victorious at Helm's Deep and now making its way south, that their home has been sacked. And it is upon their field of victory that Merry and Pippin are reunited not with Gandalf, but with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, who come to Isengard through the wilderness on March 4th. Having discovered the fates of Merry and Pippin, the three hunters are content to leave them and the confinement of Saruman to the Ents. With no Gandalf to guide them, they rest on the outskirts of Isengard, catching up on the events of Merry and Pippin's time in captivity and in Fangorn as Aragorn debates their next move. On the morning of March 6th, they encounter the Grey Company, the band of Dunedain Rangers and the Sons of Elrond coming south to aid in the war. They bring the same message as in the canon tale from Elrond. Bid Aragorn remember the words of the seer and the paths of the dead. Over the land there lies a long shadow, westward reaching wings of darkness. The tower trembles, to the tombs of kings doom approaches. The dead awaken, for the hour is come for the oath-breakers. At the stone of Erech they shall stand again. And hear there a horn in the hills ringing. Whose shall the horn be? Who shall call them? From the grey twilight, the forgotten people. The heir of him to whom the oath they swore. From the north shall he come. Need shall drive him. He shall pass the door to the paths of the dead. Aragorn's way is now clear. He must traverse the perilous paths of the dead, a pass reached by Dunharrow, which is even now, unbeknownst to Aragorn, being fought over by the Rohirrim and the orcs of Isengard. Saruman's army has certainly suffered losses during the sack of Helm's Deep, and they're in for an even greater challenge at Dunharrow. While the citizens of Edoras under Éowyn flee to Dunharrow in the canon tale, our theory includes Theoden, Éomer, and the 3,000 soldiers that would have otherwise gone off to battle. And while Saruman's force is still greater, the nature of Dunharrow's construction greatly works against them. The stair of the hold that winds up the mountain leading to Dunharrow is hundreds of feet long, looping back and forth. Any attack would not only be pinned on this narrow road, but also susceptible to archers from levels above. Thus begins the siege of Dunharrow. Aragorn and the Grey Company journey south with caution. They do not know what has transpired in Rohan, but they know that a great force issued south from Isengard. As they come upon the ruin of Helm's Deep, they encounter a great force of 1,000 strong. Fortunately, these are not the orcs of Saruman, but the riders of the Westmark assembled by Erkenbrand. Erkenbrand, having been informed by his own scouts of the siege of Dunharrow, is preparing for his own assault. Aragorn and the Grey Company join the Rohirrim, and coming south to the valley of Harrowdale, their force descends upon the army of Isengard, and combined with the force of Dunharrow, they are successful in lifting the siege. Unlike in the canon tale, there are no Huorns to destroy the retreating orcs, so a disorganized group of some 2,000 infantry retreat, making their way back toward Isengard. For his part in helping the Rohirrim, Aragorn is welcomed by the king. though still treated with hesitancy at the promptings of Grima Wormtongue. The still poisoned king would not take counsel from Aragorn, yet he will not hinder him on what the king believes to be a journey to his death, by traversing the Dimmold to the paths of the dead. As Aragorn comes to the Stone of Eric, summoning the army of the dead, the surviving orcs and Dunlendings arrive at Isengard, to find it under the control of the Ents. Thus begins the second Battle of Isengard. Ultimately, this depleted and defeated force is no match for the Ents, who notably still have their sizable force of Huorns, who are never sent to Helm's Deep. For Saruman, the end result is the same. His forces are destroyed, and his fortress becomes his prison. So Isengard is controlled by the Ents. Merry and Pippin are with Treebeard. Rohan, still led by a king under the influence of Grima Wormtongue, is safe for now, but also weakened and hiding at Dunharrow. Aragorn and his company now have an army of dead soldiers at their disposal. But how does Gandalf the White's absence affect Sauron's plans? And what of Frodo and Sam? The sad truth is that Frodo's fate, and that of all Middle-earth, is decided far earlier than any great wars or last-minute wizard heroics. For on February 26th, upon Amon Hen, when Frodo puts on the ring, Sauron's gaze searches for him. In that moment, in the canon story, Frodo hears a voice in his mind saying, "Take it off, fool, take it off, take off the ring." This voice is none other than a newly resurrected Gandalf the White, striving against the Dark Lord in the mind of the ring-bearer. Without this voice showing Frodo he was free to choose, he falls prey to the promptings of Sauron, keeping the ring on his finger too long. Indeed, we are told just an instant longer is all Sauron needs, and he finds him. Sauron now knows the ring-bearer and his ring are at Amon Hen, and with no hesitation, the Nazgul are assembled on their winged steeds. Notably, there are only 8 at this time that can be sent. For 3 days earlier, on February 23rd, Legolas had shot the winged steed of one, leaving it to return to Mordor on foot. No doubt Sauron also sends out companies of orcs from the Black Gate to scour the lands between Mordor and Amon Hen, but the first to arrive will unquestionably be the Nazgul. But how soon will they arrive? For that, we look to Gandalf's own words. "It is 200 leagues or more in straight flight from Barad-dûr to Orthanc, and even a Nazgul would take a few hours to fly between them." For those unfamiliar, 200 leagues roughly converts to 600 miles. And assuming a few hours to be around 3, possibly 4, that means the fell beasts can fly at a speed of 150 to 200 miles per hour. Or for those who prefer metric, that's up to 320 kilometers per hour. Even without these speeds, just using Gandalf's words, we can see looking at the map that Amon Hen is less than half the distance from Barad-dûr as Isengard. And while some Nazgul may indeed be surveilling other areas, we can safely assume the first will arrive no later than 2 hours after Frodo is discovered by Sauron. Assuming Frodo would not remain frozen wearing the ring, he and Sam would make it no further than the early stages of their journey through the Emyn Muil, where they would be for the next 3 full days. Unlike in the canon tale, there is no Grima at Isengard to throw out the Palantir. Thus, Pippin does not look into it, inadvertently tricking Sauron to believe the ring is at Isengard. Likewise, Aragorn does not look into the Palantir, which makes Sauron believe he now has the ring and is heading to Gondor. Together, these circumstances mean Sauron is not pressed into attacking Minas Tirith. Instead, his full attention and resources are sent after the Ring-bearer, who is tracked down and killed in the Emyn Muil. The ring is taken by the Nazgul, who take to their winged beasts and fly with speed back to the Dark Tower of Barad-dûr. The ring is reclaimed, Sauron is returned to his full might even before Saruman's army takes Helm's Deep and makes for Dunharrow. With the One Ring finally returned, Sauron prepares for his grand assault upon Gondor. Rohan and Isengard have weakened one another. Denethor, Faramir, and Gondor prepare for an assault upon their city, and Aragorn makes his way through the southern fiefs with the army of the dead. Without their greatest ally's remarkable return, the peoples of Middle-earth would have surely fallen to the Dark Lord. And the final battle in Sauron's war comes not at the Black Gate of Mordor, but the Black Outer Wall of Minas Tirith. Obviously, taking Gandalf off the board makes for a rough time in Middle-earth. Thankfully, Gandalf will be on the board as you play The Lord of the Rings: Fate of the Fellowship. It's a brand new cooperative board game where your fellowship of characters have to help Frodo reach Mount Doom. It features some great artwork of your favorite characters, plus the great dice tower of Barad-dûr. Visit the link in the description and pre-order your copy of The Lord of the Rings: Fate of the Fellowship. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Darracott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Z and N, Evely, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.